The most dangerous leader in healthcare might not be that one who raises her voice, who maybe is threatening, or who's known for being mean. It might be the one everyone calls excellent, the one who never misses anything, the one who seems to be completely in control all the time. Because underneath that kind of control, something else is usually happening. A whole team quietly loses its own capacity to think, to act, to trust themselves, and that's happening one small moment at a time. So I learned this twice before I ever became a leader myself, and then I lived it out for years before I understood what I was actually doing. And today, I want to show you that whole arc. Hi, I'm Diane. I spent 25 years as a nurse and nurse practitioner before I became a healthcare leadership architect and patient-centered leader. This is Roots of Change podcast, where we talk about the patterns we carry through our decisions, our leadership, our relationships, and into the way we show up for people counting on us. Sometimes the root goes back to a relationship where you slowly lost yourself. Sometimes it goes back further into childhood and the things that you lived through long before anyone saw you as a leader. And the truth is, what we can see clearly is what we are able to change. And so that is the work that we do here together. Time for the story. The first lesson came long before I ever wore scrubs. Growing up, the leadership that I seen modeled at home was simple. Do everything right. Be the little soldier. Follow the rules perfectly every time, because if you didn't, there was a price to pay. Think about a dartboard where the bull's eye moves the second that the dart leaves your hand. It doesn't matter how good your aim was. It doesn't matter if you really were about to hit it dead center. The moment it moves, you miss anyway. And it somehow feels like your fault. And that's what growing up felt like for me. The target never held still long enough for getting it right to actually count for anything. So I learned to chase perfect anyway, even knowing that the target might move on me. Staying in very serious control of myself, being careful, exact, and watching every angle felt like the only chance I had, because making a mistake comes with a price, and even doing everything right still came with a price, since perfect was never actually possible to begin with. Then I got my very first nursing job, and I watched that same lesson play out again, except now it was in a hospital with a grown woman in charge of an entire unit. The director of nursing on that unit ran things on one belief: nobody could do anything nearly as well as she could. So she did not let her nurses handle things. If a patient's condition turned, if a doctor needed to be called, she would step straight into the middle of it. She would walk into the room, take the phone, and call the doctor herself every single time before any of us even had a chance to try. Picture training wheels on a kid's first bike. If someone runs alongside and grabs the handlebars the very second that the bike wobbles, every single time, that kid can ride for years and still never learn to balance, because they've never actually been given the chance to fall and catch themselves. And that's exactly what was happening on that unit. Every time a nurse's hand reached for the phone, someone grabbed the handlebars first. It did not matter how capable the nurse standing there actually was. The second something urgent happened, she treated every one of us like we had suddenly become incapable or maybe even useless. Not because we were, though, but because she could not tolerate the idea of anyone but her holding that moment. So here's what I watched. I could see grown, trained nurses slowly stop speaking up, stop reaching for the phone. They stopped trusting their own clinical judgment, because what was the point? She was going to take over anyway. I did not see any of this clearly back then. I just absorbed it the same way I had absorbed those lessons at home. Yeah, control equals competence. Control equals safety. So when I finally stepped into my first real leadership role as a fairly young nurse, I did exactly what I had been shown twice already. I believed leadership meant being in command of everything, knowing every answer, owning every decision myself. And I remember some of the more experienced staff looking at me in a certain way, like they were genuinely wondering what on earth was going on with this new leader. And I could feel that my approach wasn't landing. I could feel that it wasn't bringing out the best in anyone, including me, but I did not know another way to do it yet. Command and control was the only version of leadership I had ever really experienced. So it was the only version that I knew how to perform. It took years before I understood this differently. And when I finally did, I realized the opposite of what I had believed the whole time was actually true. I believed that stepping into leadership meant leaving my clinical skills at the door. The same way a chef might hang up his favorite knife the day he becomes the head of the kitchen, certain that the title alone should be enough. What I did not realize was that my clinical skills, my instincts, my judgment, all those years of reading situations and a patient at the same time were exactly the strengths I needed to bring with me and not leave behind. I had been so busy putting on the leadership mask, trying to control everything, that I completely forgot that the thing that actually made me good, that made me a great leader, was actually inside me the whole time. So here's the part that matters most, and it is uncomfortable, so stay with me on this. A leader who needs to know everything, control everything, and catch every possible mistake before it happens is actually not protecting her team. She is slowly teaching that team that their own judgment does not matter, that their voice is not needed until something goes wrong enough for her to swoop in. So think about a table held up by 4 legs. If one leg suddenly decides that the other 3 can't be trusted and tries to carry the whole table alone, that one leg is going to crack eventually, no matter how strong it is, because tables were never built to stand on one leg. And teams are the same. They are built to share the weight. So maybe in your world, it looks like a manager who rewrites every email her team sends before it goes out. Maybe it's a leader who has to be copied on every decision, no matter how small, because she genuinely cannot rest until she's seen it herself. Maybe it's the meeting where everyone has stopped offering ideas, not because they don't have any, but because they have learned that their ideas will get rewritten anyway. So why even bother saying it? So let's bring this back together. A bullseye that moves before you can ever hit it. Hands that grab the handlebars before the new rider even gets a chance to learn their balance. A table trying to stand on one leg. 3 different pictures, but they taught me a whole cluster of beliefs, not just one, before I ever got the chance to choose anything for myself. I learned that perfect was the only acceptable outcome, even when perfect was a moving target and not even possible. I learned that control equaled safety, and safety meant doing everything yourself. I also learned that leadership meant I had to know every answer and own every decision by myself, because that's the only version of leadership I'd ever seen up close. And underneath all of it, I learned to distrust the very instincts that had made me good at my job in the first place. The same instincts that I left at the door and put on the mask when I became a leader. It took real time and real distance to see that the opposite was true on pretty much every level. Strength was never in knowing every answer. Safety is never the same thing as control. And the one thing I thought I had to leave behind to become a leader was actually the thing and the skills that made me worth following. So here's what I actually mean when I say the most dangerous leader in healthcare is the one who has never looked at herself. I mean a leader who has never once stopped to ask why she grabs the phone before anyone else can reach for it. Why she rewrites every email instead of trusting the one her team already wrote very well. Why she needs to be copied on every small decision before she can actually rest. A leader who's never asked herself those questions is still being run by something she was programmed with a long time ago. It could have been at home, it could have been her first job, and this happened long before she ever had the title of leader. And because she's never paused and looked closely enough to see it, she has no idea of how much of her team's confidence and capability is quietly draining away every single day she stays in that pattern. The greatest risk in leadership was never a leader who didn't know enough. It was always a leader who never looked inside herself to find out what's actually driving her. What is driving her beliefs? What is driving her decisions and her behavior? So that is the invitation underneath everything I have shared with you today. Once you can finally see where patterns like these started, now you get to choose on purpose whether it still belongs in the way that you lead now. If anything in this episode felt close to home or somewhat familiar today, I would love for you to come a little deeper into this work with me. I am building a live masterclass on exactly this question, a real look at whether your organization and your leadership are running on where you're wearing a mask or whether you're leading as a patient-centered leader. So in other words, running on control instead of trust. So details for that will be coming soon, so keep an eye out for it. In the meantime, my book, Rooted to Rise, The Rise of the Patient-Centered Leader, walks through exactly these kinds of patterns, where they come from and how to lead differently once you see it clearly. So this book's now available for pre-sale. I will put the link in the description box below and the show notes for you wherever you are listening or watching. And so thank you so much for being here with me today, and I will see you on the next episode.